A very warm welcome to Happy Times and Places. I, Toby Haydock, have asked a friend to choose a Doctor Who story and to pick their favourite things about each episode. I then have to watch, commentate along as positively as I can, dropping in facts and observations, and seeing if I can guess what my special guest's favourite things are.
Hiya Toby, Daisy Connolly here, retired comedian. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 things that I love about my Who story, which is Terror of the Zygons.
Welcome everyone. As I record this, the blasting heat of summer has transformed in a matter of moments into raindrops the size of balloons, and now I was just about to take Bernard the dog for a walk and he refused. He loves going to the park because I think he can tell that those grey clouds that are mingling above are gonna, as they mingle and grind and crunch against each other, they're gonna make each other weep, and their tears will fall upon the earth and make for rather a drizzly and dreary walk. So Bernard ain't going anywhere. He's sitting feeling very sorry for himself. Within arm's reach, I'm scratching his nose as we speak, because he's been too hot today, and now it's a bit too thunderous to go outside. So I say all of this only to try and draw in the atmosphere. They've been lovely light summer nights of late, and appropriately, as we draw an inky cloak over Terror of the Zygons, the night itself has suggested that the heavens may be quiet, but they're never empty, and there is a sort of ominous. There's something I can feel. So it's quite muggy. It's quite muggy, but it's grey, and it feels like we're being closed in upon, which is very appropriate for this final episode of this wonderful slice of Hinchcliffe Holmes Baker. Oh, what a noble triumvirate. Doctor Who, well then add, Camfield, Quartet, Sladen, Martyr, Bank Stewart, Bergen. Oh, well, I've forgotten how many people I mentioned then, so I can't even attempt the group, the numerical grouping. But anyway, what a bunch, a bevy. That'll cover us all. What an illustrious bevy of contributors to what has been, up until this point, a thrilling. As I said, there were flaws with 2 and 3, but covered by production and conviction. But part 1, I think, has been as perfect instalment as Doctor Who as one could possibly have had. And now we go to part 4, which was always, as I say, I think I saw the Scarrison before I saw anything else really of Zygons. I may have seen the odd clip here and there. So it's always, and I was very, very cross always with that Resistance is Useless documentary where, they used the Scarrison, that anorak going, the production team thought they could, prided themselves on pulling off excellent special effects for not very much money, and then showed the Scarrison, which everyone at the time didn't pride themselves on and felt to be slightly flawed. So I still rail at the injustice of that. Some people say I shouldn't take such things so seriously, but I think when television makers started to mock other television makers, when people making documentaries supposedly celebrating a show that deliberately skewed the narrative of that documentary to take the piss, I think the world became a worse place, and I think we can chart the decline of civilization from that point, because we shouldn't do that. It's actually better, I think, to celebrate and doff the cap. Or certainly, you can acknowledge something isn't pulled off, but not in a sentence where you're saying production teams prided themselves on pulling. There were plenty of special effects they could have shown that were good. So they were having enough because they were in charge of the edit. So they were abusing their power because they could have done anything there, and they choose to do the one that took the piss. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, it's a documentary called Resistance is Useless that launched a repeat season of old Doctor Who and thought the way to do it was to take the piss out of Doctor Who. They even, and again, instead of showing a list of great acting moments, they showed a bit of actors going over the top. Which again you can choose from 26 years of history if you want to, and then and you go and you think people are now going to watch this repeat season that you've put out after you've just essentially ratnered this. It's not a thing I like because, well, I don't know, I I tend to appreciate Endeavour, and it's very easy to, it's making television programs is hard. It's very easy to take the piss, but the people from television should perhaps know better. Anyway, that's because I'm dry and humourless, misery guts. Anyway, so with that in mind, let's watch this in no way dry and humourless slice of Doctor Who. We've been in the company of Daisy Connolly, who has been a brilliant advocate for the show, and to whom I must apologise because I suspect this video I have it on pause. She's just finished what she's saying about part 3, so I don't know what she's going to say about part 4, but she's paused there, frozen in time, I think from during the pandemic, so a while ago. But good things come to those who wait. I mean, the Zygons came centuries ago, didn't they? They've hung around for ages doing whatever it is they get up to. So I hope Daisy has been okay. I'm sure she's not been waiting. Oh, when is Toby going to release that podcast with me talking about Terror of the Zygons? Anyway, it's now, Daisy. So listen, we are going to watch episode 4 of Terror of the Zygons, and we are going to press play in 3, 2, 1. How exciting. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, by the way, so I hope we continue with part 4, which is playing now, but I can't hear any of it. Why is that? Ah, I can. Okay, so the sound was just down a little bit. It's always nice for you to have a little bit in the background, although I know that almost everybody does not watch these with the pictures. This is what you listen to on your way to work, or even better, while you're at work and supposed to be working. Anyway, part 4. Do you know, I if you asked me which ones are episodes and which ones are parts, I might struggle. I know Ice Warriors is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, not part or episode. So here we go. I do like a leather glove. All that sort of stuff, all that sort of, genuine military hardware, and the Brigadier's jumper and all of that. And it somehow all looks more realistic in a Douglas Camfield story. I don't quite know why. And here we are. It mustn't have been very comfortable for John Woodnutt with that sort of embryonic body language that he has. And Ronald Goff, that's Ronald Goff, I think, as that Zygon. I think he ended up running a toy shop. He's interviewed on the I Was a Doctor Who Monster video that Real Time Pictures did. But he and Keith Ashley are also the Crinoid, so they obviously enjoyed pairing up to play monsters together. But Keith Ashley went to play the Dalek in Destiny of the Daleks, and Ronald Goff didn't. You have to come out and throw a tentacle. I love that. Look, I think this is a great episode for John Woodnutt, who, spoiler alert, is probably going to be one of my things. I have to choose my favourite thing about the episode, and of course, bonus thing for the whole story. And the story sort of changes tack a little bit here, doesn't it? Nice grouping there from Camfield. We're making use of his extras, having them sort of further back in the shot. James Muir standing up. I wonder if he knew somebody, because he seems to be getting all the hero shots as far as the extra equivalent, which is being the most prominent person in the background. But still, nonetheless, he gets a fair slice of the screen time. But again, Camfield makes all of that stuff look really good and really plausible and really real. Nice to see Sarah sort of doing her job, going through papers and being smart, and she's not asking anyone for permission to do what she does. She's not asking anyone's help or for direction or guidance. She's she's leading this. This is what she does. This is her bag, going through all of this stuff. And it's sort of Harry's last, and Harry is a sort of bit redundant, isn't he? You can see why, they wanted him, the trustee of the golden haggis lucky dip. But yes, this is all useful stuff, because we're not wasting time, Harry. But yeah, Harry would have been there to lend physicality to an older Doctor, but I think that's to sell the character short. I think his, slightly old-fashioned, sort of stoical, uncomplicated character, in contrast to Tom Baker's sort of sardonic, testy Doctor, is actually quite nice, and that dynamic that he has with Sarah. And I do think Philip later said that he felt he may have been a bit hard on Harry, and that they could have actually kept him on. Now you see that is an excellent shot. That shot of the spaceship is really, really good. And this, I hadn't even remembered that shot that we just saw. And this model one, I know is good. So it's only actually the bit where it comes out from the lake and is stuck with slightly bad CSO that it's problematic. That's a problematic. That's a word that has a very different tone to it these days, isn't it? Yes. Now here's another bit. That again in a lesser story I'd be furious about. The Zygon prison has a speaker in it which gives the prisoner all the information he needs about the Zygon plan and a potential flaw to be exploited. Now, one could say, well, it's not a prison. Zygon spaceships don't have a prison. It's some sort of, room that is used for something else and has been co-opted to be a prison. But no, I think you'd have to anyway. It's only because I'm sort of looking for things to say. Well, no, it's only because when I was watching it, I was struck by the scene with Harry and Broton in part 2, where he just explains the plot to him, and bits like that have sort of struck me in a way that they don't normally when I've watched the story. Look at that wonderful close-up of Sarah. It's the Loch Ness Monster. This is where Terror of the Zygons, as I never knew it, becomes. Look at John Woodnutt with his hands behind his back. It's beautiful. Wonderful synthesis of monster acting and recognizable sort of human body language, yet it's made slightly sort of perverted when he turns around and has that embryonic gait. It's beautiful. And he enters with such attitude as well. I love John Woodnutt. Have you noticed? I think he's fantastic in this. And a great servant to Doctor Who, spearhead from space, frontier in space, and keeper of Traken. But I think this is probably his best bit, his best role in Doctor Who. I think it's his best performance. There are a couple of slightly awkward moments in Keeper and in Spearhead, actually, but he's actually pitch perfect in this. And now this is difficult because Tom Baker treads a fine line, doesn't he? Is that he takes the piss. He takes the piss out of the monsters, a sarky clapping of the hands there and going, why bother? But look at what's he doing here. He's not giving Baker anything, and Baker's insolent grin there, with a darkness in his eyes, as he's needling him with obtuse humour, and isn't it a bit large for about the six of you? Is a kind of joke, isn't it? Saying, I mean, actually, there are only 3 Zygons in terms of performers, and it hasn't convinced me that we're on a spaceship swarming with them. But then again, is that what that speaker's trying to do? Suggest there's a whole colony of them there. But no, if the Doctor's saying there's only about 6 of them, and this is the plan, you think big. But he's not. Oh, the mean temperature of the polar ice caps raised a few degrees. Well, I suspect maybe there are some Zygons running big businesses on Earth right now as we speak, he said, stroking his chin and being all political and like that. But it's certainly that would be a nice storyline for the Zygons if you were to have them today, if you wanted to refer back to a line in this. We shall see. What does he say here? I demonstrate my ultimate power, he does, but he says it with such sort of detached loftiness. It's beautiful. It's such a wonderful piece of acting. He's got a slightly sort of sardonic distance from the whole thing. He's not patronizing the program, but he is slightly, he is slightly above it in a way. But not that I advocate that approach. I certainly don't like it when an actor sort of messes about and shows that they're beneath the thing that they're in. But I don't think he's doing that. I think he's just not compromising the classiness that he exhibits just because it's Doctor Who, and that gives it that does give it a sort of slightly wryly amusing character to the performance, and I think it's lovely. But Tom Baker really straddles the line, doesn't he? Because he does sort of take the piss, but never in a way that undermines the show. You know, when he's doing that sort of stuff, going, "Oh, you think big, and isn't it big for the six of you," and all that sort of stuff. He's never winking at the audience and saying this is stupid. You know, all of his humour is to try and put the baddies off their guard and to try and prick their pomposity. And here we have, absolutely understood, madam. This is Doctor Who predicting the rise and rule of Margaret Thatcher, which, of course, I mean, it wasn't Margaret Thatcher at the time, was it? But the idea that the Prime Minister could be a woman was seen as, you know, the stuff of speculative children's science fiction, good golly mahoops. And he's a tough guy, isn't he, Tom Baker's Doctor? He's a big, burly, salty presence, and he's just essentially, hasn't he? He short-circuited a panel in order to, give them a trace. You know, that's pretty much laying yourself on the line, isn't it? It's laying yourself on an electric current. And he does do a good scream as well. I mean, he's really committed to it. That's a classical actor of heft, really giving it some welly. And he can do it. You know, he can do it in a way that I would say not all doctors have been necessarily comfortable with. That's the brilliant thing about Baker. He's good at the humour, but he at this stage he never lets his humour undermine the realism or the drama or the moment. You know, it's never at the expense of the programme. But he can do the drama, the physical. He could do the physical stuff. You know, he can take on all of the physical requirements of the role, which requires charging about and, you know, being quite hefty in places. He underestimated the power of organic crystallography. I mean, that is a line that it takes a special kind of actor to deliver. And I have to say, I think there are some marvellous actors today, and some of the work in modern television programmes where people turn up and have very little rehearsal time and create all sorts of charismatic and layered and brilliant performances. "Oh, look, I'm alive," he says. That look of disbelief on his face. I think it takes a special kind of actor to say he underestimated the power of organic crystallography, and to do it with such sort of dry observation. And he's so still in his face. He's enjoying it, but he's not mugging. That's the beauty. He's wryly amused. At worst, he's wryly amused by it, but he's also coldly powerful. And of course, yes. So again, they've taken their eye off him a little bit, and obviously their ship doesn't have sensors. So you know, or cameras or anything like that. So yeah, everyone gets to sort of walk around the Zygon spaceship unmolested, which I suppose is the price you pay if you have an organic spaceship. But that's the production helping out the script there again, really, which I think does kind of give our heroes free rein every now and again to wander around and, you know, discover things about the plot or move things along. Oh, Tom Baker is very much enjoying manipulating those controls. But this is all lovely stuff. But yes, Tom. I mean, where the blazes am I? Tom on a spaceship. He's so good. He's so good at judging it all, Tom Baker. I mean, to think this is only really the end of his first year. He lands pretty much fully formed, doesn't he? This is beautifully lit. It's beautifully lit, and those are fantastic monsters, and they're doing great control manipulation. And isn't there something rather wonderful? Is he going to... I love that. That's just so wonderful. I love that. Again, there's no sort of histrionic alienness about that. He says it very deadpan, and then he puts his bowler hat on and he walks out with his, is it an umbrella or a cane, like a city gent. That's actually quite Avengers-y, isn't it? I know people accuse Seeds of Doom of being a bit Avengers-y, and that you've got a sort of city gent type thing and amidst all this sort of craziness. But I think that's a wonderfully Doctor Who thing. And then you have that brilliant forced perspective shot of the Zygon spaceship and then the Duke exiting it, but, you know, he's far away, Dougal. but it's glorious. It's fantastic. Just bits like that of attention to detail of the production. And again, there's like the monsters walk straight past. They're on high alert, but they kind of do let our heroes do their thing, and we're now about to have a self-destruct thing, which is all a bit hokey, but it's fine. I think it's fine because it's so well done. Tom Baker's so watchable. I think he's about to be quite rude to the caber, isn't he? I wouldn't have really liked this as an actor because Robert Russell does a kind of, hey, is that broken enough? And sort of chucks it to him, and he's all pally, and Tom Baker's line is, oh, more than enough. So he could have given him a wink and go, oh, more than enough, big man, thanks very much. But he's like, yeah, more than enough. He can occasionally be quite waspish and pesky with his co-stars, and you can tell later on when he likes an actor and when he doesn't. He adores Beatrix Lehman, but he can be pretty terse with others, and he does have that in him. He has a mean-spiritedness as a doctor, and I would say occasionally as a person, which I guess is all part of his magic, but I wish he didn't have to have the mean bit. He's also wonderful and gorgeous and charming, and has made my heart sing. But we've seen bits of him on the studio floor, and I've witnessed a couple of times when you just go, oh, mate, oh. But that's because he's a vast, rich, and complex personality, and none of us are perfect. My God, I list you a list of my faults right now, so I'm not throwing it. But that was just to me an observation of that side of Tom Baker that we sometimes see. Now, I love that side of his Doctor sometimes particularly when he's being like that with a bad guy or something. But he can sometimes do it with people he doesn't really respect, and it's quite often sort of factotum types of character. We always think of sort of Pertwee as being the slightly snobbish one, but Tom Baker can be. But then when he's with Vince, when he's also above that and can be very and he's very deferential to Harker, isn't he? In Horror of Fang Rock, it depends what mood Tom Baker is in, I guess. Great explosion, great perspective shot of them all escaping. This is all terrific stuff. This is high end, and this story is completely changed now from being, the one in the sort of in the mysterious village, with the spooky goings on in the cold sea at night, is now we've got an explosion in a quarry, and the story's suddenly escalated. What's going on? Where are we going to be? Look at Benton's talking to James Muir there at the back. He's got the hero shot again. I mean, hero shot from the nose upwards, but again, it's kind of filling the screen. Camfield's filling the screen with his assets, one of which is in Camfield's hands, John Levine, and they're acting away behind them there. But this all looks good. Oh yes, so we've got the PM and the River and the Energy Conference. So it all comes together, and this is where Sarah's doesn't Sarah's research go well here. He'll have a pass, that's right. The real Duke is president of the Scottish Energy Commission. That's right, I am. And I've had a message via Twitter, I think, so I can sort of do this in real time if I haven't made a hash of this. David Spencer says, I love Zygons, watch with Daisy, it's so rewatchable. In episode 4, one of my funniest moments when the Duke of Forgill says, that's right, I am, when Sarah tells him he's on some committee or other. It is a bit hokey, but it's fine. And this is really interesting because we've just had that pan up from the side of the Thames, which is, we like it when Doctor Who uses London landmarks, don't we? And I sort of forget about this having one because we've got sort of Benton in a corner of unit with a radio, and that's pretty much, we've had quite a lot of that, which is probably only half a set, but this whole security conference now, if you did that, wouldn't you? You'd have a shot of the assembled throng. You'd have important people in the committee. You'd have some VIPs who, that would exacerbate the threat that's about to occur. But this all takes place as sort of noises off. This is all happening in the wings, which is partially budgetary. The the show is not a big budget show, so we can't really introduce any more cast members now. So the whole thing is told at the backstage of this massive conference that we assume is going on. I think we could have done maybe with some noise from the big main hall or something, but it doesn't really matter because you've got this wonderfully spooky lighting here, beautifully lit. This whole thing is beautifully lit. That might be my other bonus. But you've got this wonderful dynamic with Sarah and the Doctor, where he never underestimates the danger. She never underestimates the danger. But he does have that kind of daring. He goes into everything with a smile on his face, even if it's danger. He smiles at danger, not because he underestimates it, because that's sometimes the only weapon that he has, is to undermine it with his attitude and to show that he's not scared. And I love the way that sort of Broton, pedals in here. He doesn't, he's a senior actor. But you don't you wouldn't believe for a second that he's the same guy that is sort of strolling around with his hands behind his back very gracefully as the Duke of Forgill. He's now, when he's the monster, he's and he makes these noises as well, these horrible alien sort of it's brilliant. It's really alien and thrilling, and it turns that sort of we're strangling people by pressing their shoulders thing that can sometimes be a bit naff. Actually, it feels like a sort of alien thing. And we used to think, I think there was a thing, wasn't there, called Sting of the Zygons? Was that a story? And I think because you didn't really strangle them either, and because there was that photograph of it in here of Broton with his arm out and the Doctor screaming. I'm sure my brother would talk about the Zygons having a sting, and I think that was to do with their suckers and everything. A bit like Omega with fire from his fingers. It was always a disappointment to me that didn't happen in the TV series. I've always thought of the Zygons really as people, as aliens that can sting you, but they actually don't. It's just all in the kind of, it's not in it. I was going to say it's all in the subtext, or it's not really there, but it kind of lurks there in my subconscious. But it's all allowable because of that sort of very alien way that Broton attacks the Doctor. And, the Doctor's clearly in pain, and this guy's died. We do take death in our stride, nothing I could do for him. And, that's not long enough to strangle somebody. But I suppose it's a sort of translation convention in real life. It would take longer and it would be more horrible to look at. But we don't do that in a show that's suitable for kids. But I love the dying death scream. And it's actually quite all that happens to Broton. Nothing clever happens. The Brigadier comes in and shoots him. But because of what Woodnutt's doing and everything, it's a pretty scary scene because he bowls in, he comes into it with loads of alien energy. Tom Baker is so watchable. I mean, what a director's dream he is. That face of his with so much going on. He had sort of childlike innocence, and then the next time we see him, he's got that sort of very, the depth of the ages on him, and he's, considering the legend of Loch Ness and the import of what's happened, and and he's giving it real sort of dramatic heft. Look at that, the only home he knows, and of course it is the Loch Ness monster. I mean, the shot of it chewing is a bit on the nose, isn't it? Oh, he's chewing the thing to break it, ang, 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 ang. But it's a good design, it's a good looking model, but it's not the conclusion that touchy teenage Toby would have wanted. Yeah, it's quite. But it's all right because we have the wonderful sardonic Duke of Forgill back, so all is well. Even though, because the one that was going to shoot trespassers was actually the alien one. I've seen it written up with that this ends on a racist joke against the Scots. I mean, I think we really need to get over this. It's a Scottish writer writing two Scottish characters having a joke with each other about a famous and, sure, not accurate. No, national stereotypes are a bit pathetic when wielded by somebody seriously. If anybody in this day and age seriously had a go at a Scotsman for being tight, then I'd think they were a half-wit. But these two are sort of equals characters sharing a gag with each other based on some hoary old thing that they've heard, and they have a wry smile about it, which you can do. I'm not saying, I don't think national stereotypes are good, but I also don't think they're the end of the world, especially when wielded in good humour by two people who, in the world of this, have been on the receiving end of them, and probably think this. I might make a similar joke about my own expense about being a country bumpkin if I'm with some mates of mine who are all from the middle of nowhere, and we know the sort of stuff that is said about us. But to then write it up or commentate upon it as being racist against the Scots, I think is taking our modern day predilection for being furious at people a little bit too far. And I think that's where the real danger lies, because it gives the real racists a pass, because they go, God, you won't let us say anything these days. This is two blokes having a silly joke with each other, and it's delivered with real loftiness. And yeah. So anyway, if there are any Scottish people who disagree with me and want to write in and tell me that they've been done real harm by that, I will of course rethink my opinion. I'm always happy to hear from contrary opinions if they are issued nicely, but I don't think that's a racist moment. Do you know what I mean? Dear goodness me. Anyway, that is the end of Terror of the Zygons. What a lovely story it was. What an absolutely brilliant production. And I have to choose my favourite things about it. What are my favourite things about Terror of the Zygons Part 4? Well, obviously, I am going to choose John Woodnutt. Of course I'm going to choose John Woodnutt. He's absolutely marvellous. He's funny, but without sending it up. And he does that line about organic crystallography and maintains his dignity, but also he's absolutely stunning and totally different as Broton. He's an alien warlord, and he's scary, and he's fast on his feet, and he's powerful, and he's there's so much that's marvellous about. I mean, the Duke is the scene stealer, of course, because he's actually got a lot of really good lines, but also he doesn't play that also, that I shall display my ultimate power. He doesn't give it any of that. He's far drier and much more sardonic, and I love that juxtaposition between the hoary alien dialogue and the very distinguished performance, the sort of sardonic very measured tones with which that stuff is delivered, I think is blimmin' glorious. And I just hate the way I just said blimmin'. I think that was a bit Alan Partridgey. And not good Alan Partridge in when Steve Coogan's doing deliberately to be funny. I mean bad Alan Partridge, as in what Alan Partridge himself would do. Anyway, it's committed to tape now. So is that bit where I got cross about something I read once, where somebody said that the end of Terror of the Zygons was racist, and so I decided to be furious about it, and I'm regretting that as well now. But damn it, it is what it is. It's unfiltered thoughts and responses and blah de blah. So I am going to create. I think I'm gonna. Yeah, I have to do John Woodnutt as my thing for part 4, and I think he really, because I've wanted to choose him a couple of times before. And the fifth, the bonus thing. Well, I mean, I do like choosing individuals, but it's so obvious for me to do that because all of the stuff I do is about looking for the real person behind the name and blah blah blah. But that story would not have been that story without Douglas Camfield. He's an amazing director. He is a really terrific, top-notch director of Doctor Who, and he knows how to wring every drip of atmosphere out of every moment. He's very good at the tension. He's very good at making it earthy and realistic and believable. And I think is, definitely simpatico with Philip Hinchcliffe's worldview. I'd have loved to see more Hinchcliffe-Camfield collaborations. Although, David Maloney, I think is I mean, Camfield, I think, was always like this, and it happens to fit very nicely with Hinchcliffe, whereas Maloney has been a decent director who flourishes under Hinchcliffe and seems to, absolutely speak translate the language of Hinchcliffe into the television it needs to be, Hinchcliffe and Holmes. Robert Banks Stewart, because I didn't mention him with Seeds of Doom, so part of the completist in me is going, well, you should mention Robert Banks Stewart, because otherwise his brilliance will not be acknowledged in the official charts of Happy Times and Places, which of course will never exist and nobody is keeping. But this is my last chance to do so, isn't it? Because Banks Stewart only did... well, actually, shall I do that triumvirate of... Because this story is a double with Seeds of Doom, isn't it? They come, like policemen and like crinoid pods as a pair, where you have this same production team doing two absolutely magnificent stories that are so resonant. Were so resonant in my childhood. I remember, I think, having this book in a tent. Because you used to do camping and things in those days. Well, I'm sure people do now, but I don't. And I remember reading The Seeds of Doom at school. And they just seemed like the absolutely perfect Doctor Who story. Seeds of Doom seemed a bit more modern because it was thinner and written by Hinchcliffe, who was a bit of a newcomer to the books to me, because the first books we had were the Whittaker, Dicks, Letts, and Hulks. I know Letts only did the one, but they were the, and Davis, they were we had the very, very early Target books. But I remember Zygons smelled like the moon base, and the Loch Ness monster, sorry, it smelled like the moon base, and the cave monsters and the demons, those early books. So I considered it sort of amongst those, because it was, I think, I don't know, it may have been nestled next to them in the shelf. It looked a bit like them, where the Seeds of Doom didn't. It was thinner and shinier, and the Robots of Death suffered a bit from that as well. So they didn't seem like as classic of books, but the Loch Ness monster is and it's got a beautiful cover. But those. But yes, that triumvirate of Camfield, Banks Stewart and Bergen make for two very distinctive and I think absolutely wonderful Doctor Who stories that are tonally gorgeous, that are funny, that are scary, that are exciting, that are witty, that are spooky, that are well characterised, that are well acted, that have some brilliant visuals, but a very distinctive sound because of Bergen's deceptively simple, fluting, melodic, menacing music, and Banks Stewart's tone and character. As I say, he has an odd take on Doctor Who with his powerful people who has machine gun wielding guards, essentially deploying lethal force outside what's essentially a massive greenhouse. You have the gamekeeper is essentially allowed to shoot people who wash up from an oil rig. It's a slightly different world, but I do kind of like it, and I do like the fact that they don't bother to question any of that. They've just got the courage of their convictions and go on with it, and yet also have the very believable things like the man from the oil firm, Mr. Huckle, and coupled with sort of eccentric characters, because Angus is a bit eccentric. Are we supposed to believe his second sight? And Amelia Ducar is a funny turn. So it's not dry. It's not like season 7, which I love as well, by the way. It does have that sort of slightly zany element that makes it true Doctor Who, because Doctor Who, all Doctor Who is true Doctor Who, but the Doctor Who that works best has a sense of humour that isn't silly and isn't stupid, but has a sardonic element to it that makes us laugh along with our central character, who has a very amused view of the world, but it's amusement that carries him through the danger. And the message there is going, try and deal with things with a sense of humour, because sometimes that's the only weapon that you've got. So the humour is sometimes barbed and dangerous, and Tom Baker is so good at barbed and dangerous. So it's a great synthesis. I was doing an AMA for patrons earlier, when we were talking about some of the things that the show could not survive without, and I was talking about the Daleks being this amazing synthesis of idea, design, writer, script editor, voice modulation, voice artist, look, all those things just came together to create something perfect. So perfect they've not really changed any of its core elements in 60 years. And I think the balance that Hinchcliffe and Holmes and Baker who has is perfect, and the alchemy of, and it is alchemy of Tom Baker. I mean, Tom Baker is human alchemy. He's a human alchemist. His face and his voice can just transport you to other worlds, but also make you amused and scared and slightly askance, and he's doing it all with that wonderful, wonderful face and that brilliant, brilliant voice, and the fact that he is from another planet. And then you have the wonderful Elizabeth Sladen, who just riffs off him perfectly. You've got poor old Ian Marter, who hints at what could have been, and is joyous for the short time that he is there. Robert Holmes, probably just putting a bit of edgy humour into the, to give all of the scripts a bit of ballast. And there's, as I said, there's bits in that story that don't work, that I think take enormous liberties with sort of plotting and exposition, but it gets away with it. And some of it's, some major set pieces take place in 2 half sets with, 3 or 4 actors only, but it somehow manages to convince because of the utter conviction with which it is done, and the utter skill that everybody has. And even when the special effects kind of slightly let the side down, it doesn't really matter because it's done with serious intent, but also with great wit and humour and invention. I think it's brilliant. I loved watching Terror of the Zygons. I hope you did too. I was going to mention, before I happened upon the idea of the triumvirate of Camfield, Bank Stewart and Bergen, which I don't think Daisy will choose, by the way, but never mind. I was going to choose the studio lighting of John Dixon, who I think deserves a nod, because that lighting in Nigel Curzon's Zygon spaceship set is absolutely phenomenal. It's beautiful and alien and strange and complementary to the design. But then that lighting in those, really, it's a big ask to have the major climax with, again, half a dozen actors in a couple of rooms away from actually the main event that they've gone to. But it's really helped by some brilliant, excellent studio lighting. So well done, everybody. But yes, so my thing for episode 4 is John Woodnutt as the Duke of Forgill, but not to be missed also as Broton, the powerful, scary alien. And my bonus thing is the triumvirate, repeated only once more, but we've already done that with Happy Times and Places. So I feel it's my last chance to, salute 3, and none of them any longer with us. We did get Bergen on the Seeds of Doom DVD. I think he died about the week that it was released, which so he didn't get to contribute to the Zygons one. But still working. I saw productions at the RSC that were scored by him. I mean, he was high end. He was, this was a guy that did, proper, serious, good drummer. And I was surprised that he seemed like somebody that would be around for a bit. And but I did have the pleasure of meeting Robert Bank Stewart, because I was there when they recorded the Zygons commentary, even though I wasn't on it, because we did several in that day, and Mark scooped in to do Zygons, and I had a rest in between doing whatever the other ones we did. We had a sort of 2-day period where we did various bits and bobs. So yeah, I didn't get to do Zygons. I'd have loved to have done, but Mark is allowed, and it was quite a difficult one to get a commentary team for, actually, because it was quite near the end of the run. But yeah, Bergen. But anyway, Bank Stewart was there that day, and I did get to meet him, and I'm thrilled that I got to meet him, because his name to me is a sign of quality on any script. Because he did, I've watched a load of Bergeracs in lockdown, and they really do hold up well. Bergerac, it's a policeman on Jersey, and his father-in-law seems to know all of the criminals. That's it. But it's shot on film, and it's got, the names on the credits: Robert Banks Stewart, George Gilaccio, who's production unit manager, who's production assistant, or what production unit manager, or production associate on this. Chris Boucher, Robert Holmes, all those names on those Bergerac programs that seem to me, where the classy Doctor Who people had sort of gone on to more mainstream fare and high quality mainstream fare. And I really enjoyed Bergerac when I was younger, and watching it again recently really, really held up. And because of skilled artisans like Banks Stewart and Boucher and all of those people who were still working in telly when I was growing up, and seemed like they'd always be here, and they were all gone now. Dear. It always comes back to death and being cross with people unnecessarily raising the spectre of racism. Oh dear. Anyway, what has Daisy said about Zygons? I've chosen John Woodnutt, and that the holy triumvirate of director, writer, and musician that repeats with the Seeds of Doom. What has Daisy chosen as her 2 final things for Terror of the Zygons?
Now then, the 4th thing, the last thing of the episodes. That's got to be a classic line from Who that always gets mimicked in our house when we hear it. It's like everybody joins in like it's the lyrics of a song, and this is the line. I underestimated him, but he underestimated the power of organic crystallography. Fantastic line. I love that one.
Yes! I mean, she didn't choose the same thing as me, but that was certainly part of my love of what John Woodnutt does, is the line about underestimating the power of organic crystallography. And I'm glad I am not the only person that has great affection for that line. And I'm glad that Daisy lived in a house where more people could have affection for that line, because for me it was a solo pleasure. Perfect, Daisy. I'm so glad. I didn't think you'd choose John Woodnutt, but at least I feel kinship with you for our choices, at least having a little bit of the yoke of the same Venn diagram.
Now, overall, the thing that I think is best about this storyline is the supporting characters. So you've got Angus, absolutely brilliant, just a gorgeous little sing-song Scottish accent and a great character. Like, then you've got the Duke, unbelievably grumpy, and you can tell from the beginning that he's meant to be that baddie. Again, it's just played so well by the actor. And then there's the nurse. When in 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out. Now, I don't know whether it was out before this episode, but the nurse in this episode has definite vibes of Nurse Ratched, doesn't she? So, that's my final thing. The whole episode is absolutely one of my favourites, and I hope that that's going to be useful to you, Toby. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thanks, Daisy. How nice to see Daisy, and what a brilliant contributor. And yes, I think the supporting characters are good. I don't think I praised Sister Lamont enough. I think Lilias Walker is amazing. She's absolutely terrifying, and I hadn't thought of the similarity between her and Louise Fletcher as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But there is a steely-eyedness about the pair of them, isn't there? Wonderful. Yes, I will go with that. And they are a great supporting character. I mean, I've eulogized the Duke of Forgill plenty because he's so good. But yeah, small cast, perfectly formed, not a duff performance in it, and that they all play their part, and they're all redoubtable character actors, bringing the magic of the character actor that Doctor Who relied on so much, because it often had to take place in small sets in the corner of a massive conference because it couldn't afford to do the massive conference, or whatever, in a village pub, in the bit of the spaceship where only 3 aliens are, or whatever. The scale has to be conveyed in other ways. Beautiful. Do you know what? I've always felt Zygons a little bit of a disappointment, because I think of what my childhood mind conjured, and then the time that I got to see it was when I was, a testy teenager prone to being disappointed by things, and it's always had that slight disappointment hanging over it for me, and coming to it fresh with this and watching it in order and not worrying about the Scarrison, and actually becoming aware of some of the faults with the script, which hadn't really struck me massively before, but realising that they don't matter if they're papered over with conviction, or just because what surrounds it is so bloody good. That's ascended in my... I mean, no, Hinchcliffe is probably below a 7 or 8 out of 10 for me anyway, and I'm not a massive scorer of 10s, because if my glass isn't half empty, it's at least 9/10 empty, full, 9/10 full, whatever. That's ascended right up for me this time. As I say, it will always be a 7 or an 8, I'm sure, but I think it's brushing greatness. Zygons. I absolutely loved watching that. I loved talking to you about it, and I loved hearing from Daisy about it. So never underestimate terror of the Zygons. And that would be foolish to do so, almost as foolish as underestimating the power of organic crystallography, and you don't want to do that. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Daisy Connolly, who can be found on Twitter at Dazed, D-A-I-Z-E-D. I'm grateful to Daisy and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Stephen Moffat, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Adamson, Andrew and Lisa, Kat Armitage, John Arnold, Kevin Ashleford, Luke Adkins, James Bell, David Bickley, Will Brooks, Rick Byatt, Gary Byrne, Robin Bland, Robbie C., Alex Kafajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Paul Caddington, Andy Case, John Curley, Mark Dakin, Rob Dawson, John Elledge, Mark Findlay Smith, Joe Ford, Gary Gillett, Paul Goodridge, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, David Green, Fraser Gregory, Paul Gregory, Legion Henderson, Dave Hoskin, Richie Howarth, Robert Jewell, Andrew Jordan, Christopher Joyce, Jax Jerkovic, Andy Kitching, and Ashley Knight. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like your name read out like that? Then you can become a patron. It's one of the bonuses. I mean, it's not the best bonus, well, unless you like having your name read out more than you like listening to bonus content, advance releases. You would have listened to this episode 6 months ago if you're listening to it now on the iTunes, Spotify, etc. release. The Patreon page will have had this 6 months before. And you also get an exclusive podcast called Far Too Much Information, as well as monthly AMAs, little bits from my archive, and other bits and bobs of access. You also get pictures of my dog and other little trinkets. But from £3 a month, that gets you all of the content. There are little things to lure you up the ladder, because you can pay more if you want. I'm not stopping you. But it's quite egalitarian. There's none of the lures are really worth it. Should I say that? You get pretty much everything for £3 a month, and you can get a 10% discount off that or any of the tiers if you pay for a year in advance. And it helps me to do a proper job on these, to maintain proper broadcast-worthy equipment, to take time away from my proper job. I don't really have a proper job, but you know what I mean. The things I should be doing to try and get work and do all of that. I actually spend proper time doing these and writing the Indefinable Magics, which you get a month ahead, and the Too Much Informations, which you also get a month ahead if you are a patron. So that's all at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. If you don't want to do the monthly commitment, you can go to Ko-fi and buy me a pretend coffee. Give me a cyber tip. At a cyber tip. Oh dear, that sounds a bit... Anyway, let's not get into that. Gold dust. On Ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. And donations that way are also hugely appreciated. But I know that money is tight. Everybody's skint. Bills are skyrocketing. I'm just glad that in these rather grim times in which we live, you have chosen to spend some of your time in my company and to make these endeavours not entirely pointless ones. And if you enjoy them but can't or don't want to make a financial commitment, that's absolutely fine. But what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes. I could do with some 5-star reviews and some good lines of some content on the reviews page to say what it is you like about these. Doesn't take you much of your time and really helps me to stand out from the crowd and to attract passing trades like the internet hooker that I am. So if you could do that, because my reviews have stalled a little bit, and it really just does help to make these things make them more noticeable to the outside world. Though what the outside world that doesn't watch Doctor Who would make of them, I've no idea. But I'm sure that there are more Doctor Who fans out there that could be listening to these who don't, because they don't know about them. So if you could let them know, that would be marvellous. But yes, Patreon, Ko-fi, it all really helps, and I'm very grateful. I'm also on the old social medias. Oh, that's very Partridgey. The old social medias. I am... Oh, God, am I Alan Partridge? Oh, please don't let me be Alan Partridge. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in a travel lodge. Anyway, oh, God. Anyway, you can try me on the old social media at Haydock Podcasts, which are the ones for these podcasts, at Toby Haydock, which is, I tweet about these podcasts, but also other stuff and maybe the odd joke. And I'm on Instagram. I'm trying to get better at Instagram. I'm doing video edits of my comedy night at XS Malarkey. That's on Twitter too, at XS Malarkey. But I have an Instagram which is at toby.haydock, and XS Malarkey, my comedy club, also has Instagram at XS Malarkey, and it's a brilliant Manchester comedy club, and we could do with your following and your liking and your circulating of our videos as well. So that all helps, and it's quite a Who-friendly place, XS Malarkey. So if you like the cut of my jib round these ear parts, he said, partridging to the max. Oh, God, what a terrible thing to realise that... you're actually close to Alan Partridge than you would like to be, except in the being, a much-loved comedy icon who will endure for centuries. I don't have that bit. I don't have the good bit, which... Anyway, so yes, please follow me on the old social media, Twitter. Oh, I also have a Facebook page where you can see what I'm up to too. All support in cyberspace, greatly appreciated. And because I've been releasing these as I go along, before I've done the whole story, I've been doing it episode by episode, people on Patreon have been sending in their comments. And Richard Bignell, the mighty Richard Bignell, gives us a bit of insight based on a couple of the things I said. So the first one, Richard says, the fuzzy location film for the Doctor running across the moor that you refer to, Toby, this is at the end of episode 2, would have been down to the way they filmed the stop-motion model of the Scarrison. I thought as much, but I didn't know how or why or where. But Richard will tell us. The location footage would have been back-projected onto a screen with the model in the foreground. As they slowly moved the model, the backing footage was also advanced one frame at a time and re-photographed as part of the setup, causing a loss in resolution. It's the same method they used to film the ED-209 model in the original Robocop, back in 1987, as seen in... He then shows a photograph. So isn't that interesting? I'd have guessed it was something along those lines, but not exactly what it was. Richard puts that explains that perfectly. And he also says on episode 1, he follows up on the deleted scene, which I talk about the sort of miraculous way it all came together. Well, he has the proper history of it because he's a proper historian rather than a lovey with an iPhone. Anyway, here we go. Just to follow up on the deleted scene, says Richard, after eulogising about the episode. He says it's a brilliant bit of television, certainly one of the episodes where I can find no fault whatsoever, no wishing they'd done something slightly different or made an alternate choice. The whole thing is superb. So yes, and Richard's a wise man. But Richard says that the original location sound recording was found first. When I was talking about the bits coming together, I might have got it in the wrong order. I can't remember what I said now. But Richard's going to give us the proper history. The original location sound recording was found first, actually by myself. That's Richard Bignell, on eBay. That was in March 2007. So he found the sound. Then, and quite remarkably, just over a year later, in April 2008, a rough part colour, part black and white 16mm, with sound for the most part, cutting copy of the scene was found amongst the material returned to the BBC archive by the family of the late film editor Ian McKendrick. Once the film had been restored and stabilised, and the missing colour restored by Stuart Humphreys, who you should follow him on Twitter, by the way, Babel Colour, he does some extraordinary things with old photographs, the original location recording was added and you ended up with the completed sequence. 2 incredible discoveries in just over a year of a mythical missing scene. And also, they had the music to it too, did they? So if they didn't have the complete score, would we have had that? Because I can't remember, but I think the music is particular to that scene, isn't it? Anyway, that's another thing. And there's not an episode 5 where I can have that clarified, so go and find that. Anyway, Richard says, if anyone wants to read the full story of how things came back together, there's a feature entitled Recovery of the Zygons in issue 4 of Nothing at the End of the Lane, www.endofthelane.co.uk. Nothing at the End of the Lane is the most marvellous release. It's a magazine of Doctor Who ephemera, research, restoration, that really gets down to the nitty-gritty. It's beautifully put together. I'm a huge admirer of Richard's, and I'm very lucky that I've been able to collaborate with him on a few projects. And you know what? If I email him and ask him for a favour when he's in the middle of doing 200 or 300 other things, he always comes up trumps, and I'm extremely grateful to him. And here he's come up trumps again, just giving a bit of context to a couple of things that I might have left a little bit up in the air. So thanks, Richard, and thanks to everyone who's listened beyond the credits. Sometimes it's just waffle, but sometimes it's gold. But that's usually because I've got someone else involved. It's Bignell Gold. Yes, I lit the Bignell signal, and he came up answering. So thanks, Richard. But do check out Nothing at the End of the Lane. It's terrific. I love Terror of the Zygons. Thanks for letting me do this. Thanks for being out there to let me do this. I'm sure there's loads of other things I needed to do tonight. There's loads to do around the house. I've got some actual work on as well. But I did this, and I'm pleased I did this. So yeah, thanks for being there. Cheers. Hope all is well and the sun is shining on you wherever you are. If not actually, then metaphorically. Ta-ta.